Okay, we are live. Yes, the ACE Organizer FAQ panel is about to start. We are waiting for one more panelist, but they will probably just join whenever they can. So for anybody on YouTube, there are closed captions available. I know it's just the automatic one, but hopefully that is better than not having any closed captions at all. We're here today on, well, at least I'm on a visitor to Gadigal Land and here in Sydney, Australia, and we are very excited to talk today about ACE organizing. How do we make it happen? What do you do? What is it like? Any tips for people? So we are going to talk about that. So I am going to invite each of the panelists. I will call one by one just so that we can get an order going, and tell us a little bit about the acentric organizing that you've done and introduce yourselves. I'm not sure if the names are showing up for everybody. Let's see, does it show up if I hide? It shows up if I hide the kind of headers. So we're gonna start with Nero. Take it away. Tell us a little bit about yourself and the ACE organizing that you've done.
All right. So my name's Nero. My pronouns are he, him. Identify as Arrow Ace. I People who know me probably know me for my Discord server I run. It's called Ace State Space. I have been part of community building for quite a while now. When I was 12 years old, I first discovered I was asexual, and that was back in like 2006, 7. So as you can imagine, there wasn't really any ace community at all. So I ended up getting really involved in the queer community and organizing that way. So, like starting the GSA at my middle school, running the GSA at my high school, various pride parades. And then after I graduated high school at 18, I discovered Avon and met another ace for the first time ever online, but was very fortunate. And someone on there reached out to me and said, "Hey, I made this. I lived in Seattle. They're like, I made a meetup group for Seattle Aces. Are you interested?" And I said, "Sure." And so I joined, and that was when the group was only like 30 people. I haven't checked recently, but there's like well over 600 people now, so it's grown. Um, so I did a lot of in-person meetups and stuff like that. But at one point, I got involved with Discord as that started getting more popular, Ace Discords, and realizing that online community building kind of bridges the gap to a lot of issues we have in the communities, Arrow and Ace communities, with outreach. And there's a lot of places where people just like can't safely be out and go to places like go to Ace stuff, or they just don't have the ability to. So that was kind of my inspiration. But yeah, I own a big server. It's very active. It's been around for 4 years now, and yeah, I will talk more about it, I believe, as the panel goes on. So thank you.
Great, thank you so much. So we're still talking about having each panelist introduce themselves and tell us a little bit about the acentric organizing that they've done. So next we'll have Tildren. Hopefully, am I pronouncing that right? Let me know.
Yeah, you pronounced it right. Hi, I'm Tildren from co-founder of Indo Aspect. Most and Discord that is supposed to facilitate the need of ACES and also arrows Indonesia and giving Indonesians access to resources in Indonesian about aspect identities. We've started to, we founded ourselves just after the 2021 AceCon. So the funny thing is we did a video 1 month after we got founded. And one of our hopes that we listed there was someday being on the International AceCon as a panelist. And here I am less than 2 years later. So it's been great fun.
Thank you for that intro. Yeah, and then on to Cobra. Koba, feel free to unmute yourself and introduce a little bit about yourself and what kind of ACE organizing you've done before. Cobra, you're still on mute. Oh, does normal... Oh, Cobra normally types and somebody reads. Yeah, go for that as well. If that's the way you would prefer to participate. Let me just check the Discord as well. Maybe we will come back to them if we don't hear back. Okay. And Tilden has shared that it's at indo.aspec on Instagram. So we'll have the link in the Discord, or maybe we will edit the YouTube bio as well to kind of add any relevant links that people want to add about their spaces and communities. And Cobra, when you're back, please let us know and we can ask the same questions again. Cool. Okay. Okay, so moving on to the next thing, we'll have everybody talk a little bit about, well, what kind of space are you looking to create for the ACE community with the community organizing, ACE organizing that you're doing? And I will show that banner. Yeah, what kind of space are you looking to create? We'll flip the order this time and go with Tilden first.
So to be honest, oops.
Oh, there we
Somehow
go. Okay.
there, but
sorry about
the
that.
space that I'm trying, yeah. So basically what IndoAspect is trying to do is that we're trying to build any ASPEC community space at all, because to our knowledge, we are the only active ASPEC group right now, besides an old Facebook group. But for that Facebook group, from what I've seen, most people just post links to their WhatsApp groups, and it's also mostly for like aces seeking someone to marry, because it's very normative here, instead of a supportive community space where we can share info about our ASPEC experiences and have support during the sorrows, and also share our ASPEC joys. So that's basically what I'm doing, and I'm more focusing on the Discord side of things than the Instagram side, because Instagram is usually handled by some of my other co-founders, but they're currently a bit busy. So that's why we've been a bit on hiatus there.
Yeah, if you could elaborate, like what are you like? What's the difference between, I guess, your Discord space and the Instagram? Like, how are you trying to reach people or engage people, especially on the A spectrum?
So for the Instagram, it's really mostly for informational posts, like we post the definitions and bit the explanations about some micro labels. We post some stories that we've collected from people in our very informal anonymous survey about the experience of a specific micro label. Because back when I was questioning, what really helped me identify as a demisexual and later demiromantic was really reading stories from other people of how they experienced the demisexual and the demiromantic. So that's what our Discord is, what our Instagram is trying to do, and it's also where we post collaborative stuff like the Instagram live that we've got pinned, where I was actually also a quote unquote panelist for a talk show with a local queer organization, and it's actually their first talk show about the aspect identities and specifically asexuality. So I was very happy to be part of that. And on our Discord, it's a more informal space. It's less public facing, so it's really just for our members and by our members. Like there's a venting channel where we like vent about normal stuff and also ASPEC related stuff. There's also the ASPEC channels for the ASPEC and the Aerospec where we like ask things about the specific ASPEC experiences. And there's a fandom channel where people are very active talking about their favorite games. There's lots of channels there, and it's really a space to just connect with like-minded people, like shoot the breeze, share support when things get rough, and also share the joys. Like there's a lifestyle channel where I just shared my outfit for today, and people have been really excited about it.
Okay. Thank you for sharing. And I've got a little bit from Cobra. Cobra says the ACE organizing that he does is mostly Discord discussions and creative and being on panels. And they added, I hope to create an accessible and non judgmental space where people can be themselves, also to learn new things, have fun, and make friends, which I found is important to feeling less alone, especially in ACE circles, and to increase awareness of other ACE minorities, such as people who are neurodivergent. Thanks for sharing, Cobra. Over to you, Nero. What kind of space are you looking to create with the ACE organizing that you're doing?
Okay, so I do have the unique experience specifically with a state space. So it is a server that is dedicated to people on the Ace and Arrow um, spectrums to make meaningful connections. And meaningful connections can mean anything as long as they're purposeful and meaningful. And when I originally made that, it was actually kind of in response to the fact that I think a very relatable experience for aces and arrows is dating apps are not great. There's not a lot of access. There's not. It's just like they're not fun. I didn't ever enjoy them. I hated how defeating they were, and I used to keep very long list of like all the places that had ace and arrow friendly um like apps, and people would try them and they're like it didn't work, and I just decided to give up, and I hated that. So with 8 state space I really tried to create something where it was more of a community, and not something where you're swiping left swiping right, but rather a place where if you try to make a connection and the connection doesn't work, you don't feel like you have to leave. Like you still have friends, or like you like the vibe of the place, so you'll stick around and keep trying to make those connections. And I feel like that has been really successful. um, and part of also creating that space is that it's really, I think, brought a lot of people together. For people who've been on the server, they know we run things a little bit different. As someone who's been in a managing and community running with a lot of experience, I kind of know what works and doesn't work as far as like moderating and creating a space um, that has a purpose. And one big thing is that we prioritize the purpose of our space. So we don't believe that we are the catch-all server for everyone. We actually have a lot of servers that we partnered with, and like we have those links so that if you're not here necessarily to make those connections, there's still spaces for you to be in so that you can still meet people and like explore your identity. And I think focusing on that purpose of our server really helps us keep things organized and focused. It's I think it's important for there to be spaces that do have more like hangout spaces are great and I love them. But I think it's also cool when you see like dedicated servers. Like there's a BIPOC ACE server, there's one for teens, like there's arrow specific servers. And I think having your community run around that is good. One thing we do is we do have some values and principles that we set up that we follow. They're listed in our rules. Our rules are long, but I you should read them. Just because it helps us, like, also as people who staff and moderate the server, also remember our purpose. And I feel like this has been very successful. We also run as a guideline based moderating, so we do have a set of like rules, but it's more about kind of encouraging people to not necessarily feel like they're walking on eggshells, but rather to be considerate of everyone. So I won't keep going into that, but the point of that saying is that with the server, I wanted to create a space that has a purpose and does its purpose well, that fills a gap within the ACE community that's not really represented well, and to create a vibe where people feel comfortable being there and still feel safe. But there's a lot more of like being considerate of people and like kind of act how you would act if you were hanging out with them in person. Um, and I'll talk more about it later, but thank you.
Sounds good. Sounds good. I might be a little bit biased because I've been on A Street Space for many years now, and it's been a lovely environment there as well. I guess I didn't even introduce myself at the beginning of this panel. So, hi for people who are tuning in right now. This is the panel on ACE Organizers FAQs. If you've got any questions, feel free to put them into the Slido. Let me see if I have a good banner for that while I look for that on the side as well. A little bit about the organizing that I do. So I joined A State Space in, I want to say 2019 or so. And there were maybe a handful of Canadians there. And so I made a group chat that said, hey, Canadians, even though, there are 5 different time zones, let's make a group chat together. And then I outgrew that group chat. And so now I've got a little side server that's kind of a little bit different from the space in that it's low moderation. It's just people are collected together and sometimes discussions and meetups happen. And I just tell people when I'm going places and say, hey, do you want to meet up? And it's much smaller scale. It's much lower kind of planning kind of environment for meeting up and organizing. So much smaller scale, but it works for me. So we can move on to the next question, but let me see if I can find the other. Oh, well, while I do that, let me just change the banner to the next question and get started with that. Bear with me as I'm learning to use this platform for the first time. So the next question is, what are events, spaces, or organizing you wish existed or existed more in the ACE space or for ACE folks? I can see that Cobra has answered with wishing for more accessible and sensory-friendly spaces, or just social spaces where people can just hang out in real life without persecution. Also, spaces that don't need a car to drive to all the time. Yeah, that definitely can be a challenge. I'm going to pose that question over to Tildren.
Okay, so for me in general, I'd say more spaces like period, and also like more in-person stuff because like I don't mind being a general aspect space where just people can meet and I can incubate ideas and then like really enable people to go do the thing that they want to do. But it does get a bit lonely when you think about when that you're the only active space. So I'd love to have more space and aerospace that I can partner with and we can do all sorts of fun collaborations with. Something that I wish existed more is actually more people willing to take the heat and the spotlight for aspect stuff. But I know that's a big ask, and like whoever is suited for it will just show up. Like if that's one thing I learned in I don't know 1.5 years is that things just happen if you really like meant to like have a space or if you really meant to do advocacy work, things just happen. So I'm just going to vibe here on my Discord, like talk with the people, make sure everyone has a nice time. Like, for example, the neurodivergent people, the trans and NDs, auto humans, everyone just have a nice time encouraging those. And yeah, I'll just know the friendly in the older, I guess, of the
Okay, I know it cut off a little bit at the end, so Children, if you want to repeat the last sentence or two that you just said before we move on to Nero.
Sure. So what I said was that I'll just in Discord server, just encourage people if any fun ideas. Make sure they have a good time. I'll just be the support of older sibling.
Thanks so much. And we'll move on to Nero. What are event spaces or organizing you wish existed or existed more in A space?
Number one answer: free resources for aces and arrows. I know that's not. I wish. It's very wishful thinking. I think one of the biggest holdups with stuff is the fact that space costs money. Time, it can cost people money. But like, I know when I was doing in-person stuff, that was one of the biggest challenges: is where do we find a space that we can meet for free, that is easy to get to, and also still has some privacy. Because I also think that like discussion groups shouldn't necessarily be out in the open, especially if people want to be discreet. And also, like, some of those conversations are not people outside of the group's business. And I know that that's really hard. I also, and I've seen a lot of groups actually um, stop meeting because they could no longer afford to meet where they were or whatever. And I ran into that where I had a space I would go to, and then all of a sudden they were like, "Oh, actually, it costs $40 to rent this room now." And I was like, "I can't. Like, I'm sorry, I can't foot that bill. Like, I'm not going to be able to." Fundraising can help with that, but like, I'm not really good at fundraising, and I don't really feel it's fair for people to be expected to fundraise. I know, like with, for example, the Seattle Aces, they were able to accomplish some really amazing things, like getting us a spot to walk at the Ace Parade. But I also know that the person who got us that also fronted the bill, and it was expensive. So, materials cost money, spaces cost money, and I think that that's a big part of why as I mentioned, I've kind of really focused more. I went away from in person to more online, because Discord's free. Like, live streaming is free. Instagram's free for the most part. So these are all resources that are very accessible and affordable and realistic. Um, Kind of like what children said. I would also like there to see more spaces, and I'd like to see them more well known. That's another part of why having our partnered, like our community partners channel, is important to me, because even if someone, let's say, joins my server, a state space, maybe they don't want it to be their only server. And we highly encourage people to check out the other servers and be part of a lot, because we do fill a specific need. But that doesn't mean that like you can only be here and you can't be there. Like, no, be here, but also be there. Like, be, like we have a Turkish group that we're partnered with. Like, I think that's super cool that they're able to make such a space for like that population. I didn't even like know they existed, and they reached out to me, and I was like, "Oh yeah, I'll support y'all." Um, and as Pat kind of mentioned, but like another part that I didn't really plan to happen with the server is that, I think part of the meaningful connections is a lot of people have been, um, we call them side servers. They're not technically associated with us, but a lot of people make what we call side servers. So they might have a specific topic they want to talk about, or they're regional or whatever, and they will like kind of invite people to come join them. And then as people like continue, like new people continue to show up, they'll like, someone will be like, "Oh, I really would be interested in joining a crafting group." And then the crafting group people are like, "Oh, actually, we have a server for that, a side serve if you want to join." And yeah, the Canadian, um, what do you guys call it? I know it's C.
Yeah, we're a Canadian A state space
Okay,
offshoot.
CADs. Yeah. That was, yeah, same thing. Like, kind of a small group that ended up building and building, and now it's like its own thing. We have a Europe one, and they've kind of actually like branched off and rebranded their name even, so that they're like, no, we're actually our own thing, which I'm like awesome. Like, I'm so glad that like these groups and these people are coming out of it, and a lot of people also have been. doing meetups on the side with that, which has been really cool, like in-person meetups. Um, like meetup.com costs money too, so otherwise I would like get more involved with it. But yeah, that's mostly kind of things. We also like, are able to run events, stream videos, do activities, which is another nice thing about Discord. So I usually encourage like someone trying to make a space. Discord is a great option. Um, I I'm not familiar with any other spaces that work as well. Um, but if you're like new to wanting to make a space, Discord has a lot of options. It's really easy, and yeah, thank you.
That's great. Thank you so much for sharing. I know, kind of adding on to what everyone has said about spaces, it's just, I know for me, I get overwhelmed by really loud spaces. And so while there's a lot of queer bars, and also sometimes those spaces are very sexualized in a way that I'm like, good for you, you can do that, but I don't want to engage with this right now. I would want more kind of quiet, low key, chill spaces that, are just queer inclusive, including ace inclusive. And sometimes, like, I've been to a business where I just see an ace flag and that just makes my day, really. And so we've touched on this a little bit already, so we're going to move on to the next question about online versus in-person organizing. Do you have any preferences? What are the pros and cons? How do you feel about them? A little bit about how you've done online and in-person organizing that you haven't already touched on with what you've said so far. We're going to maybe mix up the order this time. Tildren, you want to go first? Oh, I think we might be experiencing a little bit of technical difficulty. Are you back?
Can you hear me?
Yep, you're good.
I think so. So my mic was causing issues that want to unmute. But I think for online organizing, and the main part is basically logistics. Like in the Injection Archipelago, and we're trying to manage have at least an off point before.
Okay, we are still experiencing some technical difficulty. Children, if you're back in the next little... Oh, you're back again. Okay. Maybe Children will come back to you. Yeah. Are you... Yeah, you're back again. And you're frozen again. So I think what we're going to do is I'm just going to temporarily mute you. And
no?
Oh, you're kind of back again. Okay. Do you want to try again? About online versus in-person.
Try again, but come back to me. So as I was saying, in last week, trying to like get it's flexible, have at least one jumping off point to like talk to people and maybe get directed to other servers or other groups that fit their specific integrated. So we really have something that all specific people can reach, because that's a main issue with the existing organizations scene. So there 2 or 3 major in Central Java. Meanwhile, West Java is the most populated province, and you can see how it causes issues, and be really awkward to reach as many as across many. So that's one reason we chose online organizing. And the reason we chose Discord specifically for the community stuff, for the more less public stuff, is that the WhatsApp Telegram groups that we've already seen exist. For Discord, it's easier to access. You don't have to share your phone number if you don't want to. You have to share and you don't want to. You can also access a web browser, so it's also overall safer for people to use, because if you really not so of getting out, because this is a very conservative environment that we live in here, then you can just use Discord by the web time, and when you're alone, or whatever. So it's really like taking the kind of media, the accessibility of a specific place, and also the safety in an and
Okay, thanks, children. You've been a little bit choppy, so we'll see if we can get a little bit of a Cole's notes from you or short notes from you in chat on the side, and I'll read those out afterwards if that's all right with you. And over to Nero. What are some considerations between online versus in-person organizing?
Yeah, so I did talk a little bit about the cons with meeting in person and the pros of online, so I might switch it around and talk about some of the cons of in person, or cons of online versus pros of in person. So for in person, I think one of the biggest pros is that, it can feel a lot more not realistic, sorry, intimate. Just being there with people, usually the groups are smaller and you have more control over like who you're talking to. You can see them, you can see their reactions, obviously. So that can really help. Another thing that uh you didn't read Cobra's, but Cobra's going to talk about, but I agree with is you tend to, I think, feel more connected when you meet someone in person. Not obviously always, but like let's say you met them online and then you meet them on person, like you might like really solidify that connection. So I think in person helps. Another thing that I really like about in person is that you get to meet local people, which is something that can be harder to do online. Obviously that can be difficult if you don't have a lot of aces or like open aces around you in the first place. But like I know for me, I just moved to the Twin Cities um, from a different place, and like not having people I know as much around here is like been hard. Like I wish that I knew more aces locally, but then like the group isn't super active. So and I don't have a car right now, so it's hard for me to like go to things. But I really wish that I had more local ace and arrow friends. I am the type of person who everyone in my life is just about ace or arrow. So um, the some of the cons of online are, kind of going back to like you don't really have a lot of control as to like who's there. And with that, if anyone's ever modded a Discord server or online space, you know, there are people who come in and they say things that aren't like really okay, or things can just get really like hectic really fast, feelings can get hurt, and I think there's a lot more work to put in to talk about like how these kinds of interactions can be harmful and impactful in a negative way. So I think it's easier when you're in person to say, hey, like I don't really like I'm not really comfortable with what you're saying, versus online I think it's harder to really convey like, "Hey, you're making me uncomfortable," and I think there's still a bit of a dismissive, um, like the culture, online culture, like community culture. I think still needs a lot of work as far as like acknowledging that like just because you're behind a screen doesn't mean that like you can just say whatever you want. Um, and that's something that we deal with on my server, especially at the size that we are at. And I think some other things are just like um, organization. The bigger, the bigger the server, the more resources you need. I've learned it's kind of wild to think about how many channels we have on our server, and you need people to watch them. So there's still some kind of resource issues I think within even online communities, but ultimately. I think both can be beneficial and have their own pros and cons. And I also highly encourage, to do either or both, just whatever is easiest for you. Um, and I have done both, and I would continue to. So thank you.
Great, and I'm going to read out Cobra's answer. Cobra says, I like both online, which is good for when you can't make it in person, especially initially, and to see if you like the group, or if you have a disability and can't function that day in person, it's good for doing activities and you can feel a little socially awkward, but it's also fun to like watch movies or play games and talk in person more about sensitive topics, because usually afterwards people can stay in contact online. So kind of a hybrid allows it to be easier to form and maintain relationships. Also, with in-person on sensory issues, in-person spaces can be difficult, but you can also ask for accommodations. Um, Also, online spaces can be sad because everyone is so far away from you. You really want to meet them because you care about each other, but either way, both have their own advantage. Um, in addition, in-person spaces can be difficult to navigate to, and so sometimes uh, they have to be careful about being disoriented or getting lost or too overwhelmed. Just sending some notes from children because of the audio quality from before. So TLDR, online is better to reach people across Indonesia. Discord is easier to access and more anonymous, so it really helps with keeping people safe because you don't have to share phone numbers, etc. And also, Discord is easier to organize for topics with different channels, which really helps. Thank you so much for everybody's responses so far. And I would say, yeah, there's definitely pros and cons. And my thoughts on the in-person versus online is the different styles of communication. Whereas online, if you're the person who maybe who's a little bit more anxious about the way you communicate, you have the chance when you're typing in things to edit and to really think about it before you send anything. Whereas maybe when you're calling or you're in person, there's whatever you say is what goes. And so it depends on maybe your communication style and what you prefer. But some things that are really nice, like being in person, is if you're a hugging person, you might be able to get hugs. And like, that's really nice if it's hard to get that in your life otherwise. So I think that's kind of my 2 cents. Cobra says, head pats in real life. Yes, yes, I agree. And we're going to go on to the next question. What's an asexual inclusive or asexual centric event that you've participated in or organized that you've really enjoyed? Just kind of getting an idea of what's out there for people. We will start with Nero.
Yeah, so the first one that came to mind is in 2019, the summer of 2019, was World Pride in New York. And I had the pleasure of being able to attend and also attend the ACE conference there and participate. That was a very that was a very fun event. I've always like I've been in Pride parades and events since I was like 10. So I love Pride parades. I know they're very overwhelming for some people, but I've always loved them, and it was always my dream to march in the parade with Aces, and I did get to do that in Seattle at one point. Um, but um, I missed the Seattle one because the same weekend to go to New York. But it was amazing. We got a group of people actually from A State Space. It was still like kind of a baby server. But we got a group of people to go and we all like rented an Airbnb and stayed there. And then we went to the conference and we brought business cards to give to people to join the server, which is very funny because two of the people that were there are now like they are now in a relationship together and living together in Canada. So that's kind of funny. But yeah, it was just super cool. It was so great to meet like other aces in person like that. Like not just people I knew, but like new people and make some new connections. And walking in the parade was just so awesome. It was huge. I mean, it was exhausting. If you marched in the parade with the ACE group in the New York parade, we stood out there for like 3 hours, and it was like 90 degrees, so it was very exhausting. But it was just great to walk and like see that volume of people being so supportive. Like I've seen it in Seattle, fortunately, but I think to that level, like people from all around the world are looking at us and like we're being seen, and that was like just such a cool experience for me. um I think that I haven't really been to any big ace events, since. I wanted to go to the one in Toronto, but I wasn't allowed in the country at the time. I won't go into why. But you know, I wasn't able to go to like Sydney, for example, but I really wanted to, but I'll probably be at the DC one. That said, I know Pride events can be really overwhelming, and there's a lot of like kind of back and forth on like whether aces are really accepted or not. And I always say that like when I was doing volunteer work as a kid, like as a teenager, I was openly asexual, and I would show up and I would say I'm asexual. And maybe it's the type of person I am, but I was like, I belong here. And people would be like, why? And then I'd say, like, this is my experience. And they're like, okay, welcome. And I think that nowadays people are more aware of asexuality in queer communities and accepting of it. But I know there's been a lot of like talk about how people are kind of shut out or like denied as part of the queer community. And in person, I think you're less likely to run into that. So if you're wanting to get involved and like meet other people, or be part of events, and you don't have asexual, like ace specific ones, I would encourage you to check out local queer events, because most of the time, like I've never experienced anyone turn me away. I'm also was in an area where I was privileged to have a lot of accepting people around me, but I found that I had more backlash online when it came to that stuff, but in person, like queer community in general will accept you as long as you show up and you say, I'm here to help, or I'm here to be part of this. So that's another thing that I think can help with, as far as like getting involved with events and communities, is check out local queer stuff. Thanks.
Yeah, over to children. What's an asexual inclusive or asexual centric event that you've participated in or organized that you've really enjoyed? You're on mute right now and also a little bit frozen, but let's see if we can get unfrozen. Otherwise, feel free to message what you might say. And also, Cobra, if you've got any examples of events that you've attended or organized that you've really enjoyed, please feel free to send it to me as well.
Sorry, I was loading earlier, I think. So I think the first thing that comes to mind of an inclusive event, the recent, is actually myself hosting a Korean watch party. And that was the past week. So like the audience, we just stream a couple of episodes, watch them together, and like just we share joy of that in series in chat. And the clear server that we're partnered with is actually also inclusive of the ACES. I actually found some ACES over there, and I'm in there as sort of a bridge. Like if people want more information about the ACES identities, usually I get pinged if anyone like gets stumped on how to explain stuff, because this is what I do now. Like I have write the early posts on Instagram, so I know how to do things. Good metaphors. Metaphors are the way to go to make things like understandable. And another thing that I thought is actually all the like collaborative that we've done for some like 2022 Pride Month. We had a weekly Twitch streams where we talk with both regional, local, and like also I think international. I think Carrie was with us once in a Twitch stream, just talking about the like aspect stuff, like how since we don't have any pride plates or anything, and that's our workaround. Like we connect with the local community and also the international one about like how is life, like how do we celebrate the joy, what are some sorrows that we share, and that kind of stuff. And there's also the Instagram live stream that I've mentioned before with the established queer organization Ars Club. I really enjoy being there talking, went over time on that one. Something for I'm just going to drop here, like there's still details, but there's actually a radio station in Jakarta that radio show slash podcast called Love Buzz, and they actually have talked a lot with the other peer organizations. Recently, we've been invited to talk about asexual identities on their show, and that's basically what we're going next after this, I think. Like besides International AIDS Day.
Okay, yeah, International Ace Day is great. Just getting more traction behind celebrating asexuality and spreading knowledge and awareness about it as well. Cobra says to the answer to what's a acentric event that you've participated in or organized that you've really enjoyed, and it's this one. Also, not many people know about it, so it's on a few people to organize, they said, which, yep, that's true. And as we gain traction and more people are aware about it, hopefully we'll have more support as we continue on with the years with doing International Asexuality Conference. Yeah, I would say for me, what's an event, two events that come to mind that I really enjoy. Let's do one online, one in person. For online, despite not living anywhere close to North Carolina, I joined the North Carolina Aces and Arrows Discord because they were running an event to watch a Japanese drama about an ace arrow duo. Very exciting to have representation in the media, although that's another panel that's happening later today. And it's called Koisenu Futari. And we just had a great time watching those 8 episodes together. And it was the first event that server had organized, and just being able to watch representation on screen and say, wow, that was relatable, and talk about our own experiences and how it related to the show was really enjoyable. And the other event that it comes to mind is I once was driving to Ottawa, which is the capital city of Canada, to help my friend move houses. And when I was there, I said, okay, I'm in Ottawa. Are there any aces in Ottawa who want to meet up? And from that initial gathering, they've continued to do group events since. And I just love that I was able to help kickstart something there. The next question is, what are some challenges, whether or not you have a solution, to asexual or asexual-centric organizing? So we'll start with Tildren. Oh, we're experiencing, I think, some technical difficulties right now. Tildren, will come back to you. Oh, are you back again? Do you want to try unmuting and seeing if you can answer the question?
Can you see?
Yep.
Okay, so this one's easy to answer. Like, it's a no-brainer. The number one challenge is actually getting people together for any kind of organizing. Let's be honest. Like, there's one in actually getting information about the Easter identities out there, so we have more people who might be able to organize. And then there's the challenge of getting one. Not everyone wants to organize, which I totally get. I have mandatory organization not want to organize stuff, like lots of things there. And part of that is also that this is not a safe country, so to speak. It's very normative, very conservative too. Like even our friends over in the North server, they have a lot of difficulties too, because this is not a great place to live, but we just happen to live here and we're dealing with that as best we can. So people might also not want to organize because of safety concerns. So yeah, the main problem is getting people to actually
Well said. Yeah, it is indeed difficult to get people to just even start organizing, let alone any challenges that come up from the country you're in or the community or etc. Yeah, that's very fair. Over to Nero. What are some challenges, whether or not you have a solution to them, to asexual or asexual centric organizing?
Yeah, so I've kind of touched up on some of it. Obviously resources is can be extremely difficult. Finding people is, I agree, is very difficult. Whether it's bringing people together or even like help finding people to help you organize a space, it's all volunteer. And I think that a lot of people don't realize like how much energy and time goes into organizing spaces. I know for me, like one of my personal struggles, and I think anyone who has been community building for long or a big space, is that I get burnt out pretty quickly. There's a lot of so in person resources is still, I think, one of the hardest. Finding people is still one of the hardest. um like I wish there was more space for people to be able to meet, but I have seen some really cool options. Like when I was doing in-person meetups, I would like use the library, because a lot of libraries, at least in the US, have meeting rooms that you can reserve. There are some other like commons places in Seattle that you can also reserve a meeting room. Apartment buildings, some have meeting room areas or like a common space. It's not necessarily like private, but like I know the one at my apartment's never used, so I might use that in the future. Obviously, you have to invite people to your apartment, but I just, I think the thought is like thinking about using like finding spaces that are free and accessible, of course, are the most important. And like kind of like keeping track of that. Like when I'm going around, I'm like looking at spaces and I'm like, ooh, this might be a good space for like um like a meetup in the future. Like, oh, this place is super cool, I bet we could, have people come here. So that's like for in person. And then online, definitely, yeah, like finding people. There's a lot of work going to run into space. Like when I first made a state space, we had like we got like up to 300 people. We'd stay around 300 to 500. We do manually prune members regularly, so we try to keep things active. But as the years went on, and I think we became more well known, we've been like consistently over 1,000 people. And that's just a lot of work. It's a lot of work to keep a track of stuff. There's a lot of messages read. We're trying to moderate, but it's hard to keep moderators because we're always just kind of losing them. And I struggle a lot with how to kind of organize it all as like the primary person. And that's something that I don't necessarily have a solution for, um, just because I'm still kind of struggling with it myself. But I think the best thing to do is like one of the things that's helping is that we built a really strong foundation for the server. As time went on, one thing that we do is we always like see things as like the people who were on the server when it first started are not the same people now, and like always evaluating like is our system we have really the best system for who's using it. And so we're always like questioning, like, do we need to change this, do we need to add this, do we need to get rid of this, and kind of adapting to the people and the space. So having a strong foundations really helped, where if I'm burnt out and I'm not like as proactive, things are still like running on its own for the most part, and not totally blowing up. Which is nice. But so that's like I think one important part too is like to be adaptable. If you have an online space, especially if you aim for it to be big, be adaptable, and to be also willing to acknowledge that like you are burnt out and that you're tired, and asking for help, or just saying like, hey guys, you know, I'm I've been like I've been really tired. I've got a lot of stuff going on. I might not be able to be as active, or I might be slow to respond. If you see my Discord, um what is that called, the signature, whatever it says, I might be slow to respond. Except I've had that for like 6 months now. So, anyways, yeah, just keeping track of that kind of stuff. Thanks.
Absolutely. And I see Cobra has responded with one of the challenges with ACE and acentric organizing is that not many people know about it. So it's on a very few number of people to do the organizing at the moment. Hopefully that does grow over time. And Children added, burnout and overwhelm is the main danger for us, even beating safety concerns most of the time. Yeah, and I definitely relate to being like wanting so much from A spaces and for A spaces to exist and throwing yourself into doing the organizing and then realizing, wow, this is a lot of time and effort. So that definitely really resonated. And I think a beautiful line I once was told by a fellow organizer in queer spaces was, we're hoping to grow at the speed of trust. We're doing what we have capacity for, and being able to check in with yourself honestly about, okay, what do I have time and energy for while I also live my life, do work, school, function, adulting, whatever. Like all of that still has to happen at the same time. And so really take care of yourself, because yeah, it does take time, and if you're not going to do it and you burn yourself out, then that's going to be a while to recover. And so hopefully we all have a little bit of care in our lives with that. Fingers crossed. Yeah. And we're on to the last question, unless we see any questions on Slido that I haven't addressed yet, or on the Discord. If not, final question. What's a tip that you have for first time organizers, whether you're organizing for the first time yourself or remember when you first were starting to get organized? What's something that you would tell to somebody who says, I would like to organize, an ace event or an eccentric space or what have you? Like, where should they start? What should they do? What are some tips or things that you've learned from your experience that you wish you knew when you were first getting started? And we will start with Nero.
Okay. So some tips that I can think of, like, is first, gosh, I wish I knew more tips. I think some things that are like really important are, like the main one is like running a space can be very personal, and it can be very emotionally, um, like emotionally draining. But one thing that I think is really important is to remind yourself, like, at least for me, like with mine, like to keep my personal feelings kind of separate. Like I can have my personal feelings about interactions on the server, and I can also have like my, what's in the best interest as a server feelings. And that's something that I would recommend for any community building. I don't think you should dismiss your personal feelings, but I think it's important to like have those be separate and like, am I viewing this because I personally am feeling this way, or am I viewing this because I do think that this is something that's, actually causing issues or whatever it is. um, I know I had a lot of people who would joke and be like, "Oh, Nero, just do this on the server. You own it anyways, right?" And integrity is another one. I think that I would encourage. And these are like weird tips, but I think they are important, because I would also say, well, it's not my server though. Like the server isn't for me. This is for the people who are on it, and like I can't just do whatever I want just because I want to. That I think that can be fun, but I think if you're really trying to build like a community, I think it's important to be considerate of everyone who's going to be in there. I know one thing is like we have a suggestions channel, and I will admit it is my least favorite channel on the server, but it is very important to have, only because it helps me get an idea of what's working and not working. And I don't necessarily do everything that people suggest, but I do think about it. And I do think about like, is this something that can be improved? Is there a way that we can incorporate this need? I think it's important to hear all feedback, because even though I have an idea of what I want the server to look like, kind of going back to like the people on it will change. It's important to hear what people are feeling while being in that space. And you're going to get a lot of different people's perspectives. For example, I'm like I'm white, I am trans, and I am neurodiverse and disabled, but like I have experience when it comes to like being more inclusive for genderqueer people, but I don't have as much experience for being inclusive of, ethnic and racial minorities, BIPOC. So, spending time trying to talk to people about like what we can do in the space to really accommodate that. Um, is important. And even beyond my own experience, like asking genderqueer people what you need, asking neurodiverse people what you need, just asking people like, what is it that we can do to make this space more welcome to you? Because even with online space, there's still a lot of accessibility needs to be addressed. So being open to feedback, being, not being afraid to ask people like what they want from the server. And then I think finally, just um, a last tip I would say is like, have fun. I know that's like cheesy, but really like you should be having fun doing it. If you're not having fun, then there's no point, Like it's nice to create the space you need, but like it's not worth it, I guess, in my opinion. Like there will always be someone, like the work you put in is great, but like a server doesn't have to live forever, or a meetup doesn't have to live forever. Like do it for as long as you want to, and then when you're feeling like you're not getting anything out of it anymore, then feel free to just say, hey, does anyone want to take over? Even just be like, yeah, I'm not going to do this anymore, but if you guys want to do something instead, go for it. But really just try to have fun. Like I get involved with my own server. I'm always making jokes. I've met tons of people myself. Like I currently live with someone um, who I met through the server, and we're best friends and roommates. We have a blast. So like I personally get a lot out of my own space. So it's worth it to me to keep running it, even if I'm really tired. So that would be my last tip.
Thank you for sharing, Nero. I'm going to read out Cobra's response. Um, they also comment, whoa, having a roommate from an online friend sounds cool. Yeah, that is awesome. Cobra's tips are go ahead and ask. It can be really scary, but organizers can be friendly and helpful and ask a lot of questions, even about small things. Write down what you might need during the organizing process. For example, they have an interpreter, and if you don't have to be skilled enough to organize, there's always smaller online background tasks that you can help with. So you might not need to necessarily be the only person organizing or like the organizer. There are other ways to help with your time, your energy, your knowledge, etc. Yeah, Tildren, do you want to chime in with what are some tips, advice you might have for first-time organizers, or things looking back yourself you wish you might have known?
So the one thing that I would really like say to my partner too is just start. Like look at what you think you're capable of and just do that small thing. It doesn't have to be like changing the laws or something. Just pick one small thing. Like maybe it's writing just a paragraph about your own experience, or writing a paragraph about your joy. Maybe it's like drawing something, creating art. Maybe it's just like saying, "Hey, this conference has been really fun. Is there any way I can help out next time?" Like just that you think that something that I've also experienced as we were putting together the market survey for our stories on Instagram. We actually spread it around on the emails we taught people, and they were happy to use it for us. Like you have a fun idea that you want to do, and you're not sure how to get word to people. Just ask any of us. Like I'm personally very happy to always boost people, because the more people know, the more people can find one place. So just start with anything that you can do and that's fun for you. The rest mostly.
Brilliantly said. Yeah, starting somewhere, starting small. Like even if it's just one person that you're chatting with, like that's already doing something. You're organizing at the smallest scale. And I think for adding on to, I guess, what everybody has said, getting feedback from people about how things went is always nice. And I guess for me, learning not to take it personally when somebody did or didn't like something from an event that I ran, and just kind of thinking about it and thinking, okay, what will I do next? But also knowing that I don't have to be or make the spaces that fit every single ACE person that I've ever met or will meet. Like, I can make spaces that work well for me, and maybe that inspires other people to do organizing that fits a different niche. And I think it's also nice for me to slowly find spaces where the thing that we have in common isn't just being asexual or on the asexual spectrum. It's things beyond that, because it's a starting point. But just because we, have 100 ace people in a room doesn't mean we'll have anything in common. And that can be really hard to connect sometimes. But at the same time, it could be the thing that's really great for you to connect through, and like that really holds everybody together for that event and future ones. So I could see both sides of it. But yeah, just starting small, doing something you would do yourself, and then inviting other people to share that with you. Nero, you had one more thing to add?
Yeah, I was just gonna say another thing that is kind of it's kind of also cliche, but if you want to get involved with like community building, I would say like, and you don't know where to start, or you don't have any experience, also feel free to volunteer to like moderate or like help run things, like run panels or run a meetup or something, because I know for me, like if I didn't have the background that I did, where I was in a lot of spaces that I was helping out with build, like organizing and stuff, because obviously like I didn't start out that way. Um, I would struggle a lot more. I think having the experience and tools from just seeing how other people did it was really helpful to have me understand how I would want to build a community. And I have been grateful for that. And I also gonna say, also going back to the suggestions feedback thing, Pat, you made a great point, which is also listen and be open to it, but also like don't have to make the space inclusive for everybody. Like I know that's something that has been a big point of tension for me and the server, is a lot of people are like, well, we want this, we want that, we want this, and I'm like, honestly though, like there's a point where that's not really fits within the purpose of our server, and I think people, get upset because they can't have it be their like one and only go-to server, which goes back to that, like, we encourage people to be on different servers because we do serve a purpose. And I always tell people, like, if you don't like the way that things are run, you're not a big fan, like, that's okay. This server is not meant to be for everyone. This is a space that you come because you want to be, and no one's holding you, like, no one's making you stay here. And I think that that's something that is okay to say. It's okay to have that mindset and say, hey, if you don't like the space, that's okay. Maybe there's another space that'll better fit what you're looking for. Thanks.
Or even challenge them, say, if you don't like what we're doing in this space, do your own organizing, get started. What do you want to see? Make it happen. So almost throwing that challenge out to people. Anyways, we are pretty much up for time. So I just wanted to say a very warm thank you to Nero, Children, and Cobra for participating on this panel. And for all of you viewers out there who are watching in, whether it's now or in the future with the recording, thank you so much for your time, your energy, your participation, and hope to see you around in the ACE community. If anybody has closing words, feel free to chime in. Otherwise, we will end the stream shortly.
I'm going to chime in with, I'm looking forward to seeing anyone like ping me in the confront server, because like I love talking to people in Discord, and also love helping other people like set up their organizing thing. It's very fun.
Going once, going twice. Well, thank you all, and see you at maybe some of the other panels or in the future at events. Thanks all. Bye for now.